At some point in your life, you've surely felt intense connections with certain people. Those glances that seemed to say everything. Those emotions that arose without explanation. That feeling that someone was meant for you. But let me ask you something. What happens when that connection isn't reciprocated? What happens when, despite everything you feel, the other person doesn't choose you in the same way? Here's the truth that few accept. The most important connection isn't the one you have with someone else, but the one you have with yourself. And today, I'll tell you something that will completely change your way of seeing love, because what you're about to hear, no one has told you before this way. When you truly love yourself, when you value yourself, when you stop looking outside for what has always been within you, the right people arrive effortlessly. The wrong ones disappear on their own. And for the first time, you stop needing someone to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. Your entire life, you've been led to believe that love comes from outside, that to feel complete you need to find someone else, that happiness lies in a relationship, in being chosen, in receiving external validation. But what if I told you that all of this is an illusion? That you don't need someone else to value you to feel valuable? That love isn't something you lack, but something that's already within you? That the quality of your relationships doesn't depend on others, but on how much you love yourself. Sigmund Freud said that what we repress in our unconscious mind will manifest itself in our conscious reality. If you're not aware of how much you're worth, you'll continue attracting people who reflect that lack of self-love. That's why many end up in relationships where they don't feel valued, where they give too much and receive too little, where the fear of loss is stronger than the desire to stay. But here's the truth. What you accept in your relationships is a reflection of how you treat yourself. If you don't love yourself, you'll accept crumbs. If you don't value yourself, you'll attract people who won't either. If you believe you don't deserve more, you'll settle for less. But when you love yourself enough, something changes within you. Your energy transforms, your standards rise, and without effort, without searching, without begging, you start attracting people who truly correspond to that value. I want to tell you something that illustrates the reflection of self-love in a relationship. Imagine someone who has spent years in relationships that don't make them happy. They've gotten used to giving everything, to trying to fit in, to adapting to what the other person thinks. They believe that if they show enough love, sooner or later they'll be reciprocated in the same way. But no matter how much they do, they always end up feeling empty. And then, after another disappointment, they ask themselves, why does this always happen to me? But here's the detail. They never asked if they were giving themselves the love they expected to receive. They never stopped to think about how they talked to themselves, how they treated themselves, how little they put themselves first. Because when you don't value yourself, you accept anything. And when you believe love comes from outside, you keep chasing it in people who can't give it to you. But one day, everything changes. That person decides to do something different. They decide to start giving themselves the love they always sought from others. They decide to treat themselves with respect, with kindness, with admiration. They decide to establish boundaries, to stop accepting less than they deserve. And suddenly, the people who were in their life before begin to drift away. But not because something bad is happening. It's because their energy is no longer aligned with those who don't know how to value them. And the most incredible thing happens. They begin to attract new people. People who respect their time. People who value their presence. People who don't need to be convinced to stay. Because self-love doesn't just change how you feel about yourself. It changes how the world treats you. The most important relationship in your life? If you want to know what your relationships will be like in the future, observe the relationship you have with yourself today. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? How do you treat yourself when no one is looking? Do you give yourself the love you expect to receive from others? Because you can't ask someone to value you if you don't do it yourself. You can't demand respect if you keep allowing less. You can't attract healthy love if you keep acting from neediness and emptiness. Freud taught us that the people who enter our lives are a reflection of our internal drives and unconscious mind. If you want to attract a strong love, first you must be strong within yourself. If you want to receive love, first you must learn to give it to yourself. If you want to build a healthy relationship, first you must heal the relationship you have with yourself. When you love yourself enough, you don't have to chase anyone. You don't have to convince anyone that you're valuable. You don't have to settle for crumbs. Because the right person will arrive when your energy is strong enough to recognize them. And here's where we get to the most important thing. Your relationships always reflect the way you treat yourself. Look at the people who have passed through your life. Look at the relationships you've built. Look at how they've treated you, how they've loved you, how they've valued you. Because here's the truth that few accept. Every relationship in your life has been a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. If they've ignored you, if they've undervalued you, if they've given you less than you deserve, ask yourself, when did you start treating yourself that way? It's not about blaming yourself or thinking you deserved the bad things you experienced. It's about understanding that what we accept from the world is an extension of what we believe we deserve. When you don't value yourself without realizing it, you give permission for others not to value you either. When you speak to yourself harshly, you surround yourself with people who do the same. When you treat yourself with indifference, you attract relationships that reflect that same disinterest. But when you learn to treat yourself with love, the world responds in the same way. I'll tell you something. Imagine someone who has felt their whole life that they're not enough. Every time they do something well, they minimize it. Every time they receive a compliment, they reject it with a nervous laugh. Every time someone treats them badly, they justify it. I'm sure it was my fault. Maybe I deserve it. This is how love is, isn't it? And so time passes. Each relationship they have reinforces the same story. People who only seek them when they need something. Partners who don't value them but whom they insist on keeping. Relationships where they feel they have to make a constant effort to be enough. Until one day, they stop and ask themselves, why do I always attract the same thing? And for the first time, instead of looking outward, they look inward. They realize that their whole life, they've been trying to get from others a love they haven't given themselves. That they've accepted less because they never learned to demand more. That they've sought external validation because they haven't learned to validate themselves. So they decide to do something different. They decide to start speaking to themselves with love, to put themselves first, to stop justifying others' shortcomings. They decide to respect themselves so much that anyone who isn't up to their level simply drifts away on their own. And something incredible happens. The people who surrounded them before begin to change. Those who don't know how to treat them with love disappear. Those who do know how to value them draw closer. Because when you change the way you treat yourself, the world has no choice but to adapt. The love you give yourself defines the love you receive. The people who enter your life are mirrors. They reflect what you believe you deserve. They reflect the wounds you haven't healed. They reflect the relationship you have with yourself. If you attract people who make you feel invisible, ask yourself, when did you start ignoring yourself? If you surround yourself with people who criticize you, ask yourself, how do you speak to yourself when no one else is listening? If you've gotten used to accepting less than you really want, ask yourself, when did you decide you didn't deserve more? The answer is always within you. Because when you change the way you treat yourself, you change what you're willing to accept from others. When you start speaking to yourself with love, you no longer tolerate hurtful words. When you decide to respect yourself, relationships that don't reflect that respect no longer have room in your life. How to transform your emotional reflection. If you want to know what kind of love you'll receive in your life, observe the love you give yourself. If you want to attract people who respect you, start by respecting yourself. If you want to surround yourself with people who value your time, start by not giving it away to those who don't deserve it. If you want to live deep and authentic relationships, start by no longer accepting superficial connections. Freud said that what we deny in our interior, we will encounter manifested in the exterior. If you keep repeating the same patterns in your relationships, it means there's something inside you that remains unhealed. But here's the good news. You have the power to change that reality. You can't change the past, but you can change how you choose to live the present. You can't erase the relationships that have hurt you, but you can learn from them so as not to repeat the story. You can't force anyone to treat you with love, but you can choose to surround yourself with those who do know how to do so. Because the love you seek outside has always been within you. The energy you project defines who you attract. Have you noticed how some people seem to attract healthy relationships? deep connections, and respect without even trying, while others repeat the same patterns of abandonment, indifference, and lack of reciprocity again and again. This is not coincidence. It's energy. Freud said that what we repress in our unconscious mind will manifest in our conscious reality. In other words, what's inside you, what you believe about love, about yourself, about what you deserve, is what you'll inevitably attract into your life. No matter how much you try to change the external, if you keep carrying fears, lacks, and unhealed wounds inside you, you'll continue attracting relationships that reflect exactly that. But when you start working on your energy, everything changes. I'll tell you something. Imagine two people looking for love. The first is desperate to find someone, feels lonely, incomplete, afraid of continuing without companionship. Every time they meet someone, they try to fit in, to do whatever is necessary to be chosen, regardless of whether it truly makes them happy. Their energy is one of lack, of need, of insecurity. And as a result, they attract people who detect that lack of self-love and take advantage of it. People who leave them in second place. People who aren't truly committed. People who disappear at the slightest inconvenience. The second person, on the other hand, has worked on themselves. They've learned to enjoy their own company. They've stopped begging for love because they no longer need it from outside. They've found it within. And when they meet someone, they don't try to fit in. They simply are. Their energy is one of abundance, of confidence, of fullness. And as a result, they attract people who are on the same frequency. People who respect them. People who want to be by their side not because they need them, but because their presence is valuable. People who don't play games because their energy leaves no room for mediocre relationships. Do you see the difference? The first person projects fear of being alone and attracts relationships that reinforce that fear. The second projects self-love and attracts relationships that reflect that love. It's not magic. It's the law of emotional attraction. Your energy is a filter for the people who come into your life. Each person who enters your life does so because somehow they're in tune with your current energy. If you attract people who don't value you, check if you've been valuing yourself. If you find people who make you feel invisible, ask yourself if you've been ignoring your own voice. If you repeat relationships where you're left aside, analyze if you've unconsciously allowed yourself to be an option instead of a priority. Because the people who come into your life aren't there by chance. They're mirrors. They show you what you still need to work on. They reflect the beliefs you carry inside. They teach you through their actions what you really think of yourself. And here comes the key. When you change your energy, you change the type of people you attract. When you respect yourself, disrespectful people no longer fit into your life. When you love yourself, people who don't know how to love feel uncomfortable and move away. When you treat yourself with dignity, people who only seek to take advantage disappear on their own. Not because you've made an external effort, but because your energy is no longer aligned with that type of connection. How to elevate your energy to attract conscious relationships. If you want to attract healthy relationships, first you need to become someone who vibrates at that frequency. Instead of seeking validation, start validating yourself. Instead of settling for crumbs, demand what you truly deserve. Instead of staying in relationships out of fear of loneliness, learn to enjoy your own company. Because the energy you project is the signal you send to the world about what you're willing to accept. If you want to attract real love, first you must be the kind of person who knows how to receive it. If you want to attract respect, first you must learn to respect yourself. If you want deep relationships, first you must connect with yourself at a deep level. Because love isn't something to be sought. It's something that's attracted when your energy is aligned with what you truly deserve. Stop chasing and start attracting. We live in a world where we've been made to believe that love is something to be sought. That if you don't have it, you must go out and find it. That if you're not with someone, something is missing in you. We've been taught that we have to strive, that we have to do something special to be chosen. That if we manage to say the right thing, act in the right way, or be attractive enough, then someone will decide to love us. But here's the truth that no one tells you. Real love isn't pursued. Because when you pursue, you're telling the universe that you lack something. When you pursue, you put yourself in the position of needing to be chosen. When you pursue, you focus so much on attracting someone that you forget about yourself. Freud said that what we resist persists, and the same happens with love. The more you seek it from a place of lack, the more it moves away from you. Imagine this. Think of a person who's desperate to find love. Every time they meet someone, their mind goes on alert. Will they like me? How should I act so they don't leave? What can I do to make them choose me? Without realizing it, they start molding themselves according to the other's expectations. They start holding back what they really want to say for fear that their authenticity will make them lose the opportunity. They start giving in too much just to make the relationship work. The result? That energy of need is felt, and instead of attracting genuine love, what it does is generate rejection. Because no one wants to feel responsible for filling another person's void. Because love doesn't work from desperation. Because when someone perceives that you need too much from them, their instinct is to move away. Now imagine another person. A person who doesn't seek, who doesn't pursue, who simply lives their life with fullness. They're not obsessed with finding a partner. They don't try to fit in with what others expect. They're not worried about whether someone stays or goes. And without realizing it, they attract. Because their energy is different. Because they don't project need but security. Because their presence is magnetic, not because they try to impress, but because they simply feel good about themselves. Real love arrives when you stop looking for it. When you stop trying to make something work with the wrong person. When you realize that you don't need to chase anything because what's meant for you always finds its way. The paradox of detachment. What you release comes to you. The problem many people have is that they believe they must hold on tightly to someone so they don't leave. They believe that if they stop striving, they'll lose the other person. That if they stop trying, the other will move away. That if they're not constantly reminding the other person how valuable they are, they'll never be chosen. But true power isn't in holding on. True power is in letting go and trusting. Because when you value yourself enough not to need to chase, you attract people who also know how to value. When you stop worrying about whether someone stays or goes, your energy becomes irresistible. When you understand that your life is complete with or without a partner, the right people appear effortlessly. Because love isn't something you beg for. Love is something that arrives when you've learned to love yourself first. How to change your energy from pursuer to magnet. If you feel that you're always the one who gives more, who tries harder, who fights more in your relationships, it's time to change your focus. Stop convincing others of your value and start seeing it for yourself. Stop giving yourself to people who aren't sure about you. Stop making unnecessary efforts to retain someone who isn't aligned with your energy. Because what's real doesn't need to be forced. What's for you flows without pressure. What's on your same frequency arrives without you having to chase it. And this doesn't just apply in love. The best opportunities arrive when you're not anxiously looking for them. The most significant connections appear when you're already good with yourself. The healthiest relationships are built when there's no need to force them. It's like when you release a handful of sand. If you squeeze it tight, it escapes between your fingers. But if you simply let it rest in your hand, it stays in place. Love is the same. You don't need to hold on. You don't need to prove your value to anyone. You don't need to be more than you really are for someone to choose you. Because when you learn to let go, when you learn to trust, the right love finds you. Building a conscious and balanced relationship. Love shouldn't feel like a constant battle. It shouldn't be a struggle where you have to prove your value, where you have to convince someone to stay, where you have to strive more than the other person is willing to give. Because real love isn't sacrifice. It's balance. It's not about losing yourself in the other person, but finding yourself within the relationship. It's not about giving until you're exhausted, but sharing from abundance. It's not about adapting to what the other wants, but building together something where both can grow. Freud said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this applies in love more than in anything else. If you enter a relationship without awareness of your unresolved complexes, you'll repeat the same mistakes over and over again. If you're not conscious of your emotional patterns, you'll attract the same type of connection disguised as a different person. If you don't know what you really want, you'll accept whatever comes, even if it's not the best for you. But when you build a relationship from consciousness, everything changes. Imagine this: two people enter a relationship. The first comes with wounds from the past, with fears, with the idea that love is suffering, that you have to fight for it, that if it doesn't hurt, it's not real. The second has worked on themselves. They know that love isn't sacrifice but reciprocity. They don't seek to fill voids because they've already learned to be happy by themselves. They don't need to convince anyone of their value because they know it perfectly. From the first moment, their energies are different. The first seeks stability in the other person, needs external security, fears that the relationship will change. The second flows without fear, without anxiety, without the need to control the future. Which of these two people do you think will build a balanced relationship? Because here's the key: you can't build a healthy relationship if you carry the chains of the past. If you cling to fears you haven't healed, you'll project them onto your partner. If you enter a relationship with the idea that love is struggle, you'll attract conflicts. If you haven't learned to love yourself, you'll depend on the other person doing it for you. That's why before building a conscious relationship, first you must be a conscious person. Love isn't about finding someone who completes you. We've been sold the idea that a partner will make us happy, that someone else's love is what we're missing, that when we find the right person, everything in our life will make sense. But the truth is that if you seek someone to fill your voids, sooner or later those voids will reappear. Love isn't about finding someone who completes you, but about sharing with someone from fullness. It's about two people who are already happy by themselves but who decide to walk together. It's about a love that isn't born from need, but from choice. It's about understanding that the right person isn't who comes to save you, but who comes to add without taking anything away. The foundations of a balanced relationship. Do you want to build a conscious relationship? You need three things. Self-knowledge. You can't expect someone else to understand you if you don't know yourself. Knowing what you want, what you need, what your boundaries are, and what kind of love you're willing to accept is fundamental. Emotional independence. Love isn't depending on the other to feel good. It's sharing from freedom without fear of loss, without attachment, without anxiety. Authentic communication. A conscious relationship is based on transparency, on speaking from truth, on not hiding what you feel for fear of discomforting. When these three elements are present, the relationship flows without the need for effort. There are no power games, no manipulation. There's no constant fear that the other will leave. There's no need to control or change the other person. Because when love is real, it feels easy, it feels light, it feels like a space where you can be completely yourself. The love you deserve begins in you. If you want to build a balanced relationship, first you must ask yourself, am I entering this relationship from fullness or from need? Am I expecting the other to make me happy? Or do I already know how to do it for myself? Am I willing to share from consciousness? Or am I still repeating the same unconscious patterns? Because the love you build outside will always be a reflection of the love you've built within yourself. And when you truly love yourself, when you value yourself, when you've learned to be at peace with yourself, you not only attract a different love, you sustain it, you enjoy it, and you build it with consciousness. Because you no longer seek someone to complete you, you seek someone with whom to grow. The love you give returns to you. Everything in life is a reflection of what you emanate. The words you say, the energy you project, the way you treat others, everything returns to you in one form or another. And in love, this is even more powerful. If you give love from lack, you'll attract relationships full of shortcomings. If you give love from need, you'll attract unstable connections. If you give love expecting to receive something in return, you'll always feel empty. But when you give love from fullness, without fear, without expectations, without anxiety, you attract people who also know how to love in the same way. Freud said, "One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. But the struggle should not be to secure someone's love. It should be to unlock the love inside yourself. Once you become your own source of love, everything else falls into place." Imagine this. Think of someone who constantly feels that love is unfair to them. They say things like, "I always give too much and receive nothing. Why do I always get the wrong people? It seems that love never works for me." And in their attempt to find a relationship, they keep repeating the same patterns. They give expecting to receive. They try too hard to be accepted. They attach with fear of losing. And what they don't realize is that they're acting from lack, from the fear of not being enough, from the idea that love is something they must beg for, from the belief that if they don't try twice as hard, they'll be abandoned. Now imagine another person, someone who has learned to love themselves so much that they don't need another to validate them, who gives love without fear, without manipulation, without expecting to receive something in return, who understands that love isn't a currency of exchange, but a natural extension of their being. That person doesn't need to chase because their energy is different, because they don't seek to be chosen. They already know they're enough, because they don't deliver love from emptiness, but from abundance. And as a result, they attract exactly the same type of love. People who value them without having to ask for it. Connections where the effort is mutual. Relationships where love isn't a struggle, but a natural flow. The love you give is the love that returns to you. Here's the key. Everything you deliver to the world comes back to you in some way. If you give love from fear, you'll receive relationships full of uncertainty. If you give love from need, you'll attract people who can't give you stability. If you give love without having given it to yourself first, you'll only repeat the cycle of emotional emptiness. But when you give love from confidence, when you love without fear of losing, when you don't need anyone to feel complete, then everything changes. The relationships that before seemed unattainable now arrive without effort. The people who didn't value you before disappear from your life. And you begin to experience love in a completely different way. Because you no longer seek it. You don't chase it. You don't need it. You simply are it. And when you become love, the right love finds you without you having to do anything. The love you receive will always be a reflection of the love you give yourself. If you've spent your life chasing people who don't value you, settling for less than you deserve, or feeling that you need to be chosen to feel complete, it's time to change the story. Because you didn't come to this world to beg for love. You didn't come to convince anyone of your value. You didn't come to wait for someone else to make you feel enough. Freud said that those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken. And today is the moment to wake up. Because real love isn't found outside. It begins in you. When you treat yourself with respect, the world responds with respect. When you value yourself, the right people appear without you having to chase them. When you love yourself enough, you only accept relationships that reflect that same love. So tell me, are you going to continue waiting for someone to come give you what you yourself can give? Are you going to continue repeating the same patterns? Or are you finally going to choose yourself? The love you seek is already within you. And when you truly discover it, your energy changes, your life changes, and the type of people you attract changes.